you probably heard of the saying, you are what you eat. Let's find out if that's true. Okay, welcome back. My name is Marc from 12weekathlete.com, and this is my third video in my vlog series all about dieting. If you missed the first or the second video, make sure you check them out first because they go sort of hand in hand. And if you've watched the second one, then you know that this topic today is going to be all about macronutrients. It's about the food you eat. And it's very, very important. And that's why at the beginning, I asked you the question, have you ever heard of the saying, you are what you eat? And we're going to look into this in more detail. So now before we get started, generally, if you have no idea what macronutrients are or what it means, or what are nutrients in general, I made a video about that as well. Check that out because it's like a PowerPoint presentation. It's very, very popular on YouTube because it explains it all in great detail, and I want you to watch that one first and then just come back to this one and start off right here. In the last video, we were talking about tracking your progress and how you're going to be using the MyFitnessPal app. Now, once you put in all your calories now in the app, it's asking you about the macronutrient split. So how many percent of your overall daily calories should be protein, carbs, and fats? That's sort of the magic number, isn't it? It's like, what is your macronutrient split? And you hear that all the time, people saying, or, when they're into their diet and stuff, they say, I'm on a high protein diet or high fat diet, low carb diet, or whatever they say, paleo diet. And these are all linked to macronutrient splits. So I'm going to reveal in this video how I do this for myself, how I do it with my clients, and what works really the best in my opinion. Now, before we get into the actual macronutrient split, I would like to share a study with you, or let's say a self-experiment of a university professor from Kansas State University. I think his name was Mark Hope, something like that. And he put himself through a calorie-restricted diet, eating basically Twinkies, Doritos, donuts, just junk food in general, just overall shit. Just to make the point, it doesn't matter what you eat. It is just about the calories. And the interesting bit is he lost a lot of weight, and his cholesterol actually, his cholesterol got better, so his results were overall better. Just making a point of saying, we were talking earlier about, the importance of calorie counting, my very first video, check it out here. And this case study really demonstrates that is, if you get that wrong, nothing else matters. I linked that study below. You can check that out yourself. It's like a little report. Just to make the point, it's more important the calories than the actual macronutrient split. I just wanted to point that out before we get into the macros, because everyone says, what are your macros? But, calories, we shouldn't forget about them. Okay, so let's have a look at the macronutrient split I use for myself and which I use for my clients as a starting point, guys. Make sure this is really important. This is a starting point, because as you start eating that diet, we might need to adjust that later on. So here's what I do. I first look at the protein content you should be eating. Now, I use a very simple formula. I take 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if I'm 200 pounds, it's 200 grams of protein. It's 800 calories for the protein. Done. The next thing I look at is fat intake. And I normally set that at, it's a bit more sophisticated in my 12-week chef later on. But for now, I take around 20%. I set the amount of calories or grams for the fat at 20% of your diet. And the rest is going to be carbs. So this plays out something around, like something in between maybe 30 to 45% of your diet or your macros will be protein. 20% will be fat. And the rest, something between 35 and 45% is going to be, again, carbohydrates. That's how I start off with the diet itself. Now let me explain why I do this way. And there's very much reason behind all of this. Okay, so after I've shared now my macronutrient split and how I do things, you probably have a couple of questions. And I guess the first question you have is, so Mark, why do you take the 1 gram per pound of body weight for your protein calculation? Now, the reason being is that research shows that you only need 0.82, to be very specific, grams per pound of body weight to build optimum level of muscle. That has been proven now loads of times. You don't need more. Everything you eat more on top had no significant more increase in muscle mass in most of the studies. So the reason why I take 1 gram is just to be on the safe side. You might be, to get the 0.82 grams might be just too hard. So the 1 gram is something really easy, but you really don't need 2.2 or 3 or 4 grams per pound of body weight, which some bodybuilders think they need. In terms of science and research, we don't need that. So that's why I stick with 1 gram, and that's fine. That's sort of an amount you can easily consume. The next question I guess you might have is, why only 20% fat? Now, when I talk about fat, and we're going to talk about the actual foods itself after this, once I share this. Now, fat itself, I talk about the good fats. I talk about the omega-3s, the avocados, olive oil, all the good fats, and coconut oil, stuff like that. The reason being is that fat is something you can overconsume very easily in terms of, fat goes down your throat, really easy. You can just chuck it down very quickly, and because it has 9 calories per gram, it is just so much more loaded with calories, so you can overconsume or reach your calorie target very quick. That's one reason. The other reason is that we do need some fat. It's not like we want to be on a very low fat, because we have some vitamins and minerals and so on. They are fat soluble, and they work with that. And also your cell membranes and so on, they are made out of fat. So we want to make sure that we get all of that in. But here comes the crux, that if you eat or if you overconsume dietary fat, our body doesn't need to transform that in any way to be able to overconsume fat, to store it as body fat. There's no transformation process. It just goes straight into your fat cell. Whereas carbs and protein is something your body needs to first utilize in various, not to make it too complicated, but your body has some processes to transform it into, to be able to store it as body fat. Let's say it that way. So these are the reasons why I take 20% fat and the 1 gram per pound of body weight, and the rest I'll take as carbs. And now you're like, Mark, you're taking so much carbs, and isn't that bad, and so on. Generally speaking, carbs are not bad. There's nothing bad about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is the main source of energy your muscle prefers to burn. The problem comes always with overconsumption and eating the wrong kind of carbs. But I talked about this in my video, what are nutrients. I talk about the exact sort of carbs, which ones you should be taking, which fats and which proteins. So make sure you watch that video as well. One thing I do want to point out is that you don't eat less protein than this 1 gram or 0.82 grams of body weight. Some people say, you know what, I just don't want to eat any protein. I like eating carbs and a lot of fat, or a high fat diet. The problem with that, what I found with myself and with my clients, is that when you're on a calorie restricted diet, meaning that you're on lower calories, we talked about this, what happens to your body, that it shuts down metabolism, and over time it wants to get rid of muscle and hold on to fat and stuff. So a high protein diet, or a higher protein, or the sufficient protein diet, helps you, first of all, to build muscle. On a caloric deficit, it helps you to sustain your muscle mass, and because the protein has a filling effect, it's very filling in a way, so it helps you to stay full for longer. You don't feel hungry so much, and these are sort of the reasons why I would recommend to at least get this one gram per pound of body weight of protein in. Everything else less than that, you will find that you're probably going to lose muscle on very much, or quicker, as if you wouldn't eat that much protein. And it isn't much. We're not talking about a lot of protein, by the way. So I talked about this earlier, that the split I'm sharing with you is a starting point. And please make sure that you get this, that this is clear. I'm not suggesting this is the best split to go with, and I'm not going to move from this. This is the split you need to take, and that's the only way, and it's the best way to lose weight. That's absolutely bollocks and bullshit. The reason being is that some people are carbohydrate sensitive, for example. They react to carbs very quickly, even if they eat the good carbs, like all the single ingredient foods, like rice, like brown rice, like sweet potatoes, quinoa. So they're sticking to the actual really good food, which has all the fiber and, you know, all that stuff that keeps you full. But their body, for whatever reason, might react to these foods with weight gain. If that's the case, then what I do is I take down the calories of the carbs and increase maybe the protein intake a little bit. So I take away the carbs and increase the protein intake. Now let's say the person doesn't like protein for whatever reason, then we increase the fat. But this is the thing, you need to play this with you yourself, or if you're coaching someone, you need to play it with the customer. You need to figure out what's the preference. Never forget, the macronutrient split is not as important as the overall calories you're taking in. Just referring back to the study you can see at the bottom. But now comes the big but, and I know you were waiting for this and saying, Mark, well, you know, if you're talking about the macronutrient split isn't important, but calories are, then you can just eat shit, right? You can eat whatever you want. You could just eat fat, just eat protein, just eat carbs. So here's the thing, guys. Now, obviously, you could eat your macronutrient split just from processed foods and shit, Twinkie donuts, you know, sodas, and whatever you want to take, and stay in that caloric intake and your macronutrient split. You would lose weight, but because the foods you're consuming are nutrient, you know, the density of nutrients is very, very low. It is sort of, you're sometimes even consuming empty calories. You have probably no dietary fiber at all. You're going to feel very, very hungry on that diet, and your body will be deprived a lot of, you know, vitamins and minerals, which you then probably would supplement with a vitamin tablet. And just think of that diet. That's just a crappy diet. It still works. You will still lose weight, but your performance will lack. And there's so many things linked to that way of eating, which is very common. I would say it's probably the American or the European diet, right? It's just going to McDonald's and you know, eating all that shit. So here's how you could spend these calories differently by sticking to your protein, carbs and fats with healthy options. And they will do so much more for you. If you take the protein from lean meats, from fish, from you know, something like Greek yogurt, some milk products, if you're able to digest that, then that will keep you at least fuller for longer, because the protein takes longer to digest than if you take the carbohydrates from single ingredient foods. It's what I always say, single ingredient foods. Like a potato doesn't need a food label. Yeah, rice doesn't need a food label. Quinoa doesn't need a food label. These are things you can eat. These are proteins, and these are carbs. This is what will fill you up, guys. There's fiber, packed with nutrients. You don't need to swallow another you know, multivitamin tablet. It's all in there. Then when we look at fat, make sure they're healthy fats, like the coconut oil, olive oil, avocados. Oh yeah, for protein you can also put an egg inside. I just thought about that. Yeah, and you know, make sure that that is sort of your all-rounded diet. And if you stick to that, you will feel fuller on the same amount of calories than you would if you eat the same amount of calories from processed shitty foods like McDonald's and, you know, and so on, and Twinkies and donuts and all these puffy foods. And you know, one of the biggest or the best things you can do is take a donut and squish it together, as you know, like squeeze it together, and then if you hold it in your hand, it's probably just like this big, and that's how much fiber it has. That's how big it will be in your stomach. Take a broccoli and try to press that together. You know, you can't really compress it because it's real food. And so that's really it, guys. I mean, that is what you need to focus on. And if, you know, I hope this answers your question in terms of macros, what kind of macronutrient split you should go for, and then also, what should these macros made up of? You know, what kind of food should you be eating? Yeah, so that's how I do it with myself. That's how I do it with my clients. And again, it's just a starting point. You need to figure out and listen to your body and, you know, all these things. But yeah, let me just check. What is next? Oh yeah, meal timing is going to be the next video, because there are many ways of how you could consume these foods, in terms of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and how much of which and what time is the best time. That's what we're going to be discussing in the next video. So thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like button. If you've got questions, again, make sure you leave them in the comment box below. If you disagree with anything, leave a comment. If you agree, leave a comment. Whatever you want to say, leave a freaking comment. And yeah, I would say you should enjoy the day, because it's in London, it's sunny. And yeah, I'm going to go out and have a good time. So I'll see you in the next video.